picture this. You're in Mumbai, November 26, 2008.
Oh, wow.
The city's, alive, vibrant, and then all of a sudden chaos just erupts. Gunfire explosions, these coordinated attacks all across the city lasting for days.
It's crazy to think about.
The 2008 Mumbai attacks, also known as 26/11,
Right.
left a scar on the world with 166 lives lost and hundreds injured. And today we're diving deep into the aftermath years later and this pursuit of justice that's really taken us across continents.
Wow.
It's the story of Tahawwur Rana,
Yeah.
a man accused of aiding the terrorists behind those attacks, and India's fight to bring him to trial.
Yeah. You know what's so captivating about this case is how it's not just a legal battle, but like a high-stakes game of international chess.
Absolutely.
It forces us to ask, how do nations work together, especially when it's something as complex as terrorism?
Right.
And the answers have implications far beyond just this one man.
Yeah, you're right. This isn't just about Rana. It's about justice for the victims and international cooperation and setting a precedent for future cases. So for those who might not know all the details, who exactly is Tahawwur Rana and what role did he allegedly play in the 26/11 attacks?
So Tahawwur Rana is a Pakistani-Canadian businessman.
Okay.
And according to Indian authorities, he was a key facilitator for Lashkar-e-Taiba, the terrorist group that carried out the Mumbai attacks.
Right.
We're talking crucial logistical support here.
Okay.
Forged documents that allowed the attackers to move freely.
Oh, wow.
And setting up communication channels that enabled them to coordinate the attacks.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So
Yeah.
he wasn't directly involved in the attacks themselves,
Right.
but his actions allegedly laid the groundwork, making them possible in the first place. That's why India is so determined to extradite him.
Exactly. For India, extraditing Rana is about more than just bringing one man to trial. It's about accountability, demonstrating their commitment to seeking justice for the victims and their families, showing that those who support terrorism, even indirectly, will be held responsible.
Yeah. This must be incredibly important for India, both symbolically and in terms of their counterterrorism efforts.
Oh, for sure.
But extradition, I know, is not a simple process.
Yeah.
What are some of the legal hurdles India faces in bringing Rana back to stand trial?
Extradition is a tangled web of legal procedures, potential appeals, and international agreements, and it often becomes a balancing act between domestic laws and international obligations.
Oh, wow.
In Rana's case, one specific hurdle has been his use of the dual criminality defense in U.S. courts.
Okay.
Essentially, he's arguing that what he's accused of doing must be a crime in both the U.S. and India
Got it.
for extradition to be granted.
So even if India considers his actions criminal, if the U.S. doesn't view it the same way, extradition could be blocked.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly complicated, especially given that the U.S. has its own interest in this case.
Precisely. The U.S. might see Rana as a potential gold mine of information about Lashkar-e-Taiba and its operations. Having him in their custody could be valuable for their own counterterrorism investigations, even if it delays his extradition to India.
That creates a real dilemma, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Two countries both committed to fighting terrorism, but potentially at odds over how to handle this one individual. It's a high-stakes balancing act with global implication.
It really is, and it highlights the complex reality of international cooperation.
Yeah.
Even when nations share a common goal, like combating terrorism,
Right.
navigating these legal and diplomatic complexities can be incredibly challenging.
It sounds like India and the U.S. are walking a tightrope here. How are they working together despite these potential points of friction to ensure that justice is served?
Despite the legal hurdles, there's been a clear commitment from both sides to cooperate. The Indian National Investigation Agency even took the unusual step of announcing that they'll send a delegation to the U.S. to expedite Rana's extradition.
Wow, that's a bold move. Sending a delegation isn't standard procedure, is it? What kind of signal does that send to the U.S. and to Rana himself?
It underscores the importance India places on this case. It's a clear message to the U.S. that they are serious about bringing Rana to justice and are willing to actively engage to make it happen. It also applies pressure on Rana,
Right.
signaling that his legal fight may be nearing its end.
It sounds like India is pulling out all the stops. This isn't just about legal maneuvering. It's about diplomatic pressure as well.
Absolutely.
So beyond the courtroom drama, what are the larger ramifications of this case? What's at stake here for both countries?
This case has the potential to shape the future of India-U.S. relations. A successful extradition could bolster their counterterrorism partnership, demonstrating their shared commitment to fighting terrorism. On the other hand, prolonged delays or a failure to extradite could strain relations and undermine their collaboration.
So we've got the legal battle, the diplomatic maneuvering, and the potential impact on bilateral relations. But what about the bigger picture? What does this case tell us about the future of global counterterrorism efforts?
Rana's case is a litmus test for international cooperation. If nations can successfully navigate these complexities and bring a suspected terrorist to justice, it could set a powerful precedent encouraging further collaboration in similar cases.
But what if things don't go as planned? Could this case potentially set us back in the fight against terrorism?
Absolutely. If Rana manages to evade extradition, or if the process becomes bogged down in legal battles and diplomatic disputes, it could send a discouraging signal to other countries. It might make them hesitant to cooperate in future cases, fearing similar complexities and roadblocks.
So the stakes are incredibly high, not just for Rana and the victims of the Mumbai attacks, but for the future of international cooperation against terrorism.
Precisely. This case goes far beyond the courtroom. It raises fundamental questions about how we hold individuals accountable for acts of terrorism, how we navigate the complexities of international law and diplomacy, and ultimately how we work together to create a safer world.
This deep dive is already proving to be a fascinating, albeit complex exploration of justice, international relations, and the fight against terrorism.
Oh.
But we've only just scratched the surface. What are some of the ethical considerations surrounding Rana's case? And what precedent could this set for future counterterrorism collaborations? We'll delve into those questions and more right after this. We've been talking about this legal and diplomatic tightrope walk that Rana's case really represents. But amidst all of this, it's easy to forget that at the heart of the story are real people, victims of a horrific attack, and their families that have been waiting over a decade for justice.
Right.
How does that human element factor into these legal and diplomatic considerations?
Yeah, that's such a crucial point. The Mumbai attacks, they left a deep wound on India's soul, a collective trauma that still resonates today. And the desire for justice, for closure, is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely.
And that sentiment understandably influences India's approach to this case.
Yeah, I can only imagine the pressure that the Indian government must be under to secure Rana's extradition. It's not just about fulfilling legal obligations. It's
Right.
about addressing a national trauma, right?
Exactly. It's about showing the victims and their families that their pain is acknowledged, their loss is not forgotten, and that those responsible, even indirectly, will be held accountable. This case carries a heavy emotional weight, one that transcends, the legal and diplomatic complexities.
It's a reminder that behind every legal case, there are real human stories, real lives that are impacted by the decisions made in courtrooms and government offices. But as we pursue justice,
Right.
how do we ensure that we're not compromising on these fundamental principles of fairness and due process? Is it even possible to balance those competing demands?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
The world will be watching how both India and the U.S. navigate this case. Did they follow international legal norms? Was Rana afforded every opportunity to defend himself? These questions are crucial not just for Rana, but for the integrity of the global justice system.
It feels like this case is setting a precedent not just for counterterrorism efforts, but for the way we approach transnational justice in the 21st century. If Rana is extradited, what kind of message does that send to other countries that are facing these similar challenges?
A successful extradition would undoubtedly embolden other nations to pursue similar collaborations. It would signal that the international community is serious about holding those who support terrorism accountable, regardless of where they are or the complexities involved.
It's about sending a message that there are no safe havens for terrorism,
Yeah.
that the long arm of the law can reach across borders. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
What if things don't go as planned? What if Rana's extradition fails?
Failure to extradite Rana for whatever reason would be a major setback. It would send a chilling message to those seeking justice for victims of terrorism. It would signal that the legal and diplomatic hurdles are simply too high, that international cooperation is too fragile to overcome these challenges.
It's almost as if this case is a test of our collective resolve to combat terrorism, if we can't even bring one individual to justice. What does that say about our ability to tackle a global network of terrorist organizations?
That's the fear. Isn't it a failure in this case? Could embolden terrorist groups, making them believe that they can operate with impunity, knowing that the international community lacks the will or the means to hold them accountable?
So the stakes are incredibly high, not just for Rana and the victims of the Mumbai attacks, but for the future of global counterterrorism efforts.
Absolutely. This case is about more than just Tahawwur Rana. It's about the principles of justice, accountability, and international cooperation. It's about our collective ability to confront the scourge of terrorism and create a safer world for all.
We've talked about the legal battles, the diplomatic maneuvering, the emotional weight of this case, and the potential impact on international cooperation. It's a lot to process.
Definitely.
As we wrap up our deep dive, I'm left wondering, what does this case tell us about the future of fighting terrorism globally?
Mm.
Are we headed toward a more collaborative approach, or are the challenges just too daunting?
That's the question that keeps a lot of experts up at night. The truth is, predicting the future of counterterrorism is kind of like trying to predict the weather.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many variables at play.
So, no easy answers there.
Right.
But if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture,
Hmm.
what are the key takeaways from the Rana case?
Okay.
What should our listeners keep in mind as they follow this story?
I think one crucial takeaway is that international cooperation isn't a luxury.
Yeah,
It's a necessity in the fight against terrorism.
right.
No single nation, no matter how powerful, can really tackle this challenge alone.
Absolutely.
We need to share intelligence, coordinate strategies, and support each other's efforts to bring perpetrators to justice.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together,
Yeah,
that the threat of terrorism transcends borders and demands a united front.
for sure.
What else stands out to you as we reflect on this case?
Well, the Rana case also highlights, I think, the delicate balancing act required in these situations.
Okay.
We need to be tough on terrorism,
Right.
but we can't compromise our values in the process. Due process, fairness, respect for human rights. These principles must remain at the forefront, even as we pursue justice for the victims.
It's about upholding the rule of law, even when dealing with those who show no regard for it. That can't be easy.
No, it's not easy at all. It requires a commitment to both justice and the integrity of our legal systems. And it demands, I think, a nuanced understanding of the complexities involved, recognizing that there are rarely easy answers or quick fixes.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation, and I think our listeners will come away with a much deeper understanding of the Tahawwur Rana case and its broader implications. Before we sign off, any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
If there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that the fight against terrorism isn't just about military might or intelligence gathering. It's also a battle of ideas. We need to be actively engaged in countering these ideologies of hate and extremism that fuel terrorism.
Right.
We need to promote tolerance, understanding, and respect across cultures and religions.
It's about addressing the root causes of terrorism, not just the symptoms. It's about building a world where peace and justice prevail, not through force, but through dialogue, empathy, and a shared commitment to a better future.
Exactly. And that requires all of us to be informed, engaged, and willing to participate in shaping a world where terrorism has no place.
Powerful words to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex world of international justice and the fight against terrorism. We'll be back next week with another fascinating story, another opportunity to explore the intricacies of our world. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.